To those particularly hard hit in Newfoundland, Labrador, PEI, Nova Scotia, and Eastern Quebec, New Brunswick, we are with you. Conservatives will do everything we can. To the emergency workers, police, paramedics, fire services, power workers, military personnel, and all those who've gotten out as volunteers to help clean up the mess, pick up the debris, remove the downed trees, restore power lines, and take the initial steps towards normalcy, I thank you on behalf of all Canadians. I'd specifically like to acknowledge the devastation that Fiona has brought to Port aux Basques, Newfoundland, stories and images of fishing boats, infrastructure demolished, homes and apartments being engulfed by waves and swept out to sea. These images are gut-wrenching for every single Canadian. As one local resident put it, this is hands down the most terrifying thing I've seen in my life. And we're still, in Port aux Basques, as many across the country have now heard, one of 2 lives was lost to the storm. So far, it was a 73-year-old woman trying to leave her home as it was swept to sea by the waves. Loss of life leaves families, loved ones, and an entire community feeling helpless. PEI potato farmers who are already suffering under the government's self-imposed export ban and missed an entire season as a result of decisions by this government to shut down their industry. And many still unable to sell their seeding potatoes, which are still subject to that same ban, now face the prospect of losing an entire year's crop. Dairy farmers are without electricity, risking the threat of losing valuable livestock. And of course, fishers have lost boats, wharves, and other critical infrastructure. Too many down east are going through extraordinary challenging times, and there's no two ways about it. That means we need to stand with the people on the ground. Slow, bureaucratic programs with big headlines and no delivery simply will not do. The government will need to act quickly to restore order, to bring back the communities that have been devastated, and to get the businesses, farms, and fishing communities back on their feet. We here in the Conservative caucus will, speaking of feet, hold the government's feet to the fire to make sure that happens. The devastation of Fiona is not just the hurricane wreaking havoc on our eastern family. Memories of Juan, Dorian, and many other storms have brought hardship and devastation. In the presence of destruction and loss, however, Atlantic Canadians have proven their iron resolve to rise again and rebuild their lives. And they will rebuild again. We stand ready to work and help them along the way. We will do what is necessary to build upon their resilience, to provide them with the infrastructure and the funding that is necessary. On this journey, though, we would be remiss if we did not thank our American allies who have stepped up to fulfill their side of the agreement. We know of power workers from Maine coming across the border. It reminds us of back in 1917, the Halifax explosion, which killed thousands of Haligonians. A train departed from Boston loaded with medical supplies, surgeons, and other medical professionals. This assistance has always been bilateral. Of course, Canadians came to the rescue of Americans fighting to retaliate against the terrorist attacks of 9/11. We, as North American neighbors, have always been so dedicated to the continuation of this friendship, and so I would like to take a moment to thank the Americans who've come across the border. In particular, the Central Maine Power sent 16 line crews to help. We thank them for their work, and we promise to reciprocate if, God forbid, ever a need should be so required. And yes, indeed. And I know that my colleague from Cumberland Colchester, with whom I'm splitting my time, will build on that solidarity. Reports are surfacing, however, of government getting in the way again. We heard that American crews working to get up into Canada and help with the rescue were held up because of the infamous ArriveCan app, which unfortunately, is with us, but mercifully only until Saturday. We call on the government to eliminate this app today so that it does not cause any more disruption. We do note the public safety minister has denied these reports, but then his cabinet colleague, the emergency preparedness minister, contradicted him and said, indeed, there was an incident and a delay at the border, although he described it as inconsequential. I would remind him that minutes are consequential in an emergency. There is no time for gatekeepers, glitchy apps, or boondoggles when Canadians are in desperate need. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank my Atlantic caucus that have kept me apprised. We were meeting on Saturday to discuss our response. They have been in contact with their local representatives, with their populations, with their fishing villages to find the needs and bring them to our attention. I'd like to thank the premiers, the local officials, and the residents firsthand, many of whom I've had a chance to speak with over the last several days. I'd like to thank the member for South Shore St. Margaret's, who reached out to local organizations, including the Maritimes Fishermen's Union and the PEI Fishermen Association and the Fish, Food, and Allied Workers of Newfoundland. On behalf of the official opposition, we will continue to pray for everyone's safety as the East Coast rebuilds following the damage and devastation of Hurricane Fiona. We as Canadians must continue to work together. In the words of the legendary Stompin' Tom Connors, soon the birds will once again be singing on every tree, and all nature will seem inclined to rest. Merci beaucoup.